Buongiorno a tutti, gentilissime colleghe, gentilissimi colleghi, care allievi e fellows della Scuola Superiore di Studi Avanzati. I miei migliori saluti in occasione di questo simposio 2021 della Scuola. Ringrazio le colleghe e i colleghi ospiti che provengono da 3 prestigiosi atenei, l'Università di Amsterdam, la Cornell University, la Scuola Normale Superiore, che hanno gentilmente accettato il nostro invito. Sicuramente il simposio della scuola rappresenta l'occasione più importante di incontro e di network annuale tra allievi e fellows della scuola, i top scientists a livello internazionale, ma è anche sicuramente un momento molto significativo per andare a stilare un bilancio delle attività della scuola stessa e soprattutto per delinearne gli sviluppi futuri. Ho il piacere di ricordare che quest'anno accademico rappresenta il 10° dall'istituzione della scuola e in questa sede annunciamo il decennale che sarà adeguatamente celebrato il prossimo 15 di novembre in quest'Aula Magna, quindi ci ridaremo appuntamento per questa celebrazione. In questo lasso di tempo breve, grazie veramente all'attentissimo lavoro che è stato svolto dai direttori che si sono succeduti e che ringrazio, dai coordinatori delle classi accademiche, dai membri degli organi collegiali, dai fellows e da tutte le allieve e gli allievi, la nostra scuola si è affermata come una realtà accademica di grande prestigio, capace di andare a consolidare costantemente la sua presenza nel panorama delle scuole superiori universitarie, e questo dovrà avvenire sempre di più. L'offerta formativa, che è stata possibile grazie alla ricchezza disciplinare che è disponibile nel nostro Ateneo, appunto una comunità biodiversa, soprattutto dal punto di vista disciplinare, articolata nelle 4 classi accademiche, le scienze giuridiche, politiche, economiche e sociali, le scienze della vita, le scienze e tecnologie, gli studi umanistici, e sui 3 livelli, cioè quindi laurea magistrale e dottorato di ricerca. Le convenzioni poi con altre istituzioni, con l'École Normale Supérieure di Parigi, la Scuola Normale Superiore di Pisa, che appunto della scuola rappresentano sicuramente il template, alle quali poi possiamo aggiungere quella con la Scuola Internazionale di Superiori di Studi Avanzati di Trieste, con l'European Molecular Biology Laboratory di Monterotondo, consentono veramente una mobilità incoming e outgoing. Facciamo un bilancio. Gli allievi che sono iscritti alla scuola in quest'anno accademico 2021 sono 95, di cui 83 iscritti a corsi di laurea, laurea magistrale e magistrale a ciclo unico, con diritto all'esenzione dalle tasse universitarie, all'alloggio gratuito presso una residenza universitaria e un contributo o borsa di studio, e 12 iscritti a corsi di dottorato di ricerca. I nostri allievi provengono da 16 regioni italiane e anche dall'estero, a testimonianza della sua attrattività che appunto dovrà sempre incrementare. Gli allievi e le allieve aderiscono alla rete italiana degli allievi delle scuole e degli istituti superiori universitari e che organizza regolarmente incontri e conferenze. Nell'anno 20, nonostante le note difficoltà che hanno colpito tutto il sistema, i nostri discenti hanno contribuito al Festival delle Scuole Superiori, che è un evento destinato proprio all'orientamento degli studenti liceali e che si è affiancato per la prima volta alla partecipazione della scuola a porte aperte, che è un momento tradizionale di orientamento di Sapienza e che quest'anno si terrà, ve lo ricordo a tutti, la prossima settimana. E il bilancio: ad oggi la scuola ha diplomato 60 laureati, 63 laureati magistrali e 4 dottori di ricerca. È molto importante andare a conservare e consolidare in maniera istituzionale il rapporto con le allieve e con gli allievi che sono già diplomati e che rappresentano sicuramente i testimonial della scuola. E quindi è stato accolto con molto piacere la costituzione a partire dall'anno 19-20 dell'Associazione Alunni della Scuola Superiore, che ha proprio nella sua mission la promozione delle iniziative che devono andare a favorire l'inserimento nel mondo del lavoro, un tema che insieme all'orientamento e al tutorato rappresenta sicuramente rappresentano sicuramente linee strategiche per il futuro. Quest'anno accademico sono progrediti in maniera significativa i lavori per la realizzazione del nuovo complesso Regina Elena, che auspichiamo possa essere consegnato il prossimo autunno-inverno e sarà disponibile per appunto ospitare gli allievi e le allieve delle scuole e di tutte le istituzioni convenzionate, nonché i visiting fellows a partire dall'anno accademico 22-23. Insomma, il complesso avrà una capienza residenziale di ben 240 posti e comprenderà gli spazi che sono destinati sia all'attività della scuola, quindi le aule per la didattica, gli uffici amministrativi, la biblioteca, gli spazi comuni per lo studio, ma anche degli spazi per il benessere come la palestra. L'internazionalizzazione sarà poi sviluppata attraverso opportune convenzioni con le scuole superiori che già attive sono presso alcuni atenei che sono inclusi nell'alleanza Civis, che già in dei contatti già intercorsi hanno mostrato grande disponibilità e interesse. Quindi i primi obiettivi saranno proprio la condivisione di corsi anche online, utilizzando la via che in quest'anno e mezzo si è dimostrata in maniera resiliente la reazione di tutto il sistema universitario, così per implementare anche mobilità di allievi e degli allievi. Io sono convinta che ai successi che già sono stati ottenuti se ne possono aggiungere altri molto significativi nel prossimo futuro, grazie all'impegno ovviamente dei fellows, delle nostre allieve, dei nostri allievi e a un convintissimo sostegno che la governance di Sapienza continuerà a fornire alla Scuola Superiore di Studi Avanzati. Vi ringrazio.
Carissimi tutti, è per me un grande onore ed una profonda emozione rivolgervi a tutti voi e accogliervi oggi dopo l'introduzione della magnifica rettrice. Io dirò solo pochissime parole perché sono a dir poco commosso, perché questa è la prima volta che ho l'opportunità di parlare come presidente della Scuola Superiore di Studi Avanzati della Sapienza. Solo questa serie di parole fa tremare veramente le vene dei polsi. E in questo momento i miei sentimenti sono davvero di umiltà da un lato e di orgoglio dall'altro e contemporaneamente entrambi. Vi do il benvenuto in questa veste e non dimentico ovviamente che sono un nuovo arrivato nella scuola e come devono essere i nuovi arrivati muovo questi miei primi passi in questa istituzione con la necessaria cautela, la prudenza e l'attenzione che ogni nuovo ambiente richiede. Sto infatti esplorando e scoprendo ed imparando e devo dire che più esploro e più imparo e più osservo e più vedo che questa scuola è stata in grado di ottenere in soli 10 anni, perché uno può dire ben 10 anni, no, in soli 10 anni un fortissimo senso di comunità e di appartenenza e nel contempo un grande servizio e impegno a favore della Sapienza. In 10 anni la scuola, mi sembra di poter dire, ha costruito una casa per i suoi studenti, per i suoi docenti e per i suoi collaboratori tutti. Questa è la casa in cui entro e spero che quanto di meglio io potrò fare per entrarvi concretamente e di portare in dono qualche cosa, la mia esperienza, la mia conoscenza e soprattutto, per chi mi conosce bene, il mio entusiasmo. Quindi penso in questo momento a me stesso come un ospite in una tavola e come tale invito, sia pur formalmente e in maniera immaginifica, a un brindisi per festeggiare e per guardare avanti. Questo è quello che farò oggi con voi ascoltando questo evento. Brindo a 1, 10, 100 anni ancora e in cui guardare avanti assieme e pensando al futuro. Concludo ringraziando la magnifica rettrice per essere stata qui con noi oggi, fra i 1000 impegni che ha. Ovviamente dico un grazie al nuovo direttore Mattia Crespi e a tutti i direttori che l'hanno preceduto. Dico un grazie a Sara, a Lucia e a Dario che hanno reso possibile questa giornata e per aver organizzato tutto questo. E poi ringrazio ancora i colleghi per avermi accolto e un grazie agli studenti perché voi siete il futuro e voi siete la SAS. Grazie mille.
Buongiorno a tutte e a tutti. Sono veramente onorato di poter essere qui a introdurre questo momento importante per la scuola. Ringrazio molto la rettrice, il presidente e gli ospiti che tra breve saranno con noi per questo momento istituzionale e scientifico al contempo. Ringrazio moltissimo gli studenti, le allieve e gli allievi della scuola e i colleghi fellows. Sono, come già accennai nel momento della presa in carica di questo compito che veramente mi ha visto impreparato e spero di portare avanti al meglio per la scuola e per Sapienza, avevo detto che nulla si fa da soli, ne sono profondamente convinto. Quindi se, come mi auguro e assolutamente auspico e voglio, la scuola raggiungerà altri traguardi importanti, sarà innanzitutto merito di Sapienza, degli allievi e vostro. Non posso esimermi innanzitutto da alcuni ringraziamenti. In primo luogo alla rettrice e al presidente per aver reso possibile questo momento in questo ambiente istituzionale molto prestigioso e visto che il momento è anche caratterizzato da una parte scientifica importante, è giusto che questo momento sia qui in Sapienza, perché la scuola è Sapienza. Ringrazio molto nuovamente la rettrice e il presidente per i loro indirizzi di saluto e per le loro calorose parole nel senso di uno sviluppo importante della scuola che ci auguriamo veramente si realizzi nel prossimo futuro. E li ringrazio anche per essere qua con noi, presenti in questo momento, è molto importante. È assolutamente importante poi ringraziare coloro che saranno, come ho detto, tra breve i nostri ospiti. Come ha accennato la rettrice, provengono da atenei prestigiosi, l'Università di Amsterdam, Cornell e la Scuola Normale Superiore, che è, appunto, come accennava la rettrice, un nostro esempio, un template, ha usato questa parola. Devo dire che vorrei aggiungere in questo momento un ringraziamento speciale non solo a tutti voi, ai fellows, alle allieve e agli allievi, ma anche a due cari colleghi e fellows, la professoressa Daniela De Leo e il professor Sciarrino, per il fondamentale aiuto che hanno dato, fondamentale supporto sempre competente per l'organizzazione di questo convegno. I ringraziamenti devono essere poi e si uniscono a quelli poco fa portati dal Presidente per la piccola ma fantastica squadra dell'amministrazione e della segreteria della scuola. Sara, Lucia, Dario, senza di voi non sarebbe stato possibile questo momento. E da ultimo, ma non certamente per ultimi, un sincero ringraziamento a tutti gli uffici di Sapienza che hanno contribuito in una maniera così attenta, continua, per la buona riuscita di questo momento. Un ringraziamento speciale che si unisce a quello poc'anzi portato dal Presidente va ai direttori passati, il professor Schiesaro, la professoressa Bozzoni e il professor Ciccarone, che abbiamo qua tra noi e diciamo in un'altra funzione, ma so con il cuore sempre molto vicino alla scuola. Accanto a loro metto gli honorary fellows, e ne abbiamo diversi in sala. In primo luogo il professor Parisi, che ci ha onorato della sua presenza. È veramente molto bello vedere che queste persone che sono passate per la scuola anche in questo momento difficile siano qua tra noi o comunque con noi anche online. Questo è bellissimo perché significa che c'è un forte sentire e uno spirito comune di tutte le persone che sono e sono passate per la scuola. Penso che questo sia una forza della scuola, il fatto di sentirsi una comunità accomunata da valori molto chiari a tutti coloro che vi hanno partecipato e vi partecipano. Vorrei solo, sicuramente ricordare uno di questi valori che penso permei il nostro sentire. Uso parole ovviamente non mie, che conoscete penso bene. L'etica della conoscenza è un concetto introdotto ormai circa 50 anni fa da una persona molto importante, a me molto cara, Jacques Monod, nel suo famoso libro Chance and Necessity. Now I would like to shift to English to add a few words on the significance of this event, the SSAS Symposium 2021. As the directress underlined, the symposium represents the most important annual meeting and a networking opportunity among students, fellows of the school, and international top scientists. The symposium is built around the interdisciplinary course, the core activity of each academic year for SAS students and fellows. The course usually focuses on a wide topic prone to be investigated from several points of view, from different disciplines. The interdisciplinary course is a bottom-up experience developed thanks to the input provided by all the academic components of the school. The approach we follow together, students and fellows, is our methodological attempt, certainly improvable, to underline that complex problem can, in very rare cases, solved with simple but never simplistic solutions. They require the integration of different competencies, the open-mindedness to let disciplines interact freely and positively, and the humility to accept even partial solution in the conviction that old left unsolved and the new questions are more richer than claimed holistic and final solutions. This is, in my eyes, the humus of interdisciplinarity. The interdisciplinarity course of this academic year is entitled The Cities. This macro topic was attacked. I use this word in a mathematical sense, by 3 working groups along 3 strands: environment, opportunity, and health, innovation, resources, and development, sociality, identity, and cohabitation. Each working group was coordinated by an informal board comprising fellows, students, and PhD students. The results of their investigations will be presented today during this symposium as a sort of round table with our distinguished guest, who will help to further stimulate our reflections. I am very honored and glad to introduce them, 3 renowned international top scientists. Tuna Tasan-Kok, she is Professor of Urban Planning and Governance at the University of Amsterdam, the Netherlands. John Forster, Professor of City and Regional Planning at Cornell University, Ithaca, US. Donatella Della Porta, Professor of Political Sciences at Scuola Normale Superiore in Florence. I don't want to take any more time, so I close here my opening, leaving the floor to the scientific sessions, the core of our event. Let me wish you a happy and fruitful symposium.
Prima di salutarvi, volevo qui salutare calorosamente Giorgio Parisi e complimentarmi ancora a nome di tutta la nostra comunità e anche della scuola per il conferimento del premio Wolf.
Ma non sarà proiettato sullo schermo grande tutto? Good morning. It is my pleasure to introduce this first specific topic of the main topic, the cities, which has been coordinated by Professor Paolo Carafa and myself as fellows, and from Chiara Cataldi as the student coordinator. And the title of this specific topic is Environment, Opportunity, and Health. This topic analyzed several aspects of the interplay between urban development and environment footprint. The entire group of students has been subdivided in 3 subgroups who analyzed specific aspects. The keynote will be held by Professor Tuna Tasan-Kok. She is an urban social geographer and planner from the University of Amsterdam, from the Faculty of Social and Behavioral Sciences. And she is really the right speaker for this specific topic our students approached. She also holds an honorary professorship at UCL, Bartlett School of Planning, and she's the founder and chair of UGovern, the Urban Governance Research Network. Her research focuses on regulation of urban development and change from different angles on themes of urban governance, property-led urban development dynamics, and spatial organization through social relations. She has initiated, designed, and coordinated several international and large-scale research projects. In particular, she was the principal investigator of Parkour, public accountability to residents in contractual urban redevelopment, and co-PI of Diversities, governing urban diversity, creating social cohesion, social mobility, and economic performance in today's hyper-diversified cities. And the principal aim of Diversities is to provide evidence for the range of social and social outcomes that may emerge from greater urban diversity, particularly its positive aspects. The title of our presentation today is Understanding the Dynamic Actor Landscapes in the Entrepreneurial Cities. Please, Professor Tuna, and many thanks to accepting our invitation. It is a real pleasure and an honor to hear you. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this kind invitation and introduction. Let me share my screen first so that we can, let me see. Okay. Do you see my screen fully?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. Good morning. Thanks for this kind invitation of Daniela and excellent organization of Mattia. I am thrilled to be here in Rome, if not physically, but definitely full-heartedly. Even the idea of being in Rome virtually is enough to make me happy today. So I'm extremely happy for this kind invitation. I'm going to talk about the behind-the-door scenes of city building today, the importance of understanding the actors, their dynamic relations, and how they shape the city. You may know that in Amsterdam, space is limited due to its historical and water-oriented morphology. This is a very well-known scene, of course. This kind of urban structure is conducive to scattered spatial developments. As you can observe it everywhere, these scattered developments are planned through incremental institutional relations. And this form of physical development appears as a patchwork. Different areas have been developed without being connected to each other in the spatial structure, and diverse styles of city building emerges around the city. And in Italy, I think you are also quite used to this form of urban development. However, limited space or historical character are not the only reason behind this form of development. Fragmented spatial development is a typical aspect of the contemporary cities under neoliberal and market-driven forms of spatial governance. I will not talk about these physical aspects today. I will rather focus on the underlying actor landscapes behind this patchwork-like city building experience. I will do this by exploring the conditions and factors that have an effect on the entrepreneurial spatial governance of cities. First, a bit of a background. We have been going through dramatic transformations ever since the Second World War, with the global service economy taking over the industrialization dynamics and leading to today's financialized world, where it became impossible to follow the capital accumulation processes. These processes require new political economic dynamics, which started with dismantling welfare state and adaptation of neoliberal political economic ideology throughout market-friendly strategies to build cities through speculation, property development, and other entrepreneurial strategies or trajectories to attract urban investments. This ongoing transformation created new state-market relations through decentralizing public responsibilities to market and other actors by privatization and limitations to fund public services. Within this wider framework, the role of the municipalities, local governments, has shifted towards creating funding for public services through land and property development mainly. As Pierre highlighted already in mid-1990s, governing the city became too overwhelming for public organizations to handle alone. In my view, one of the biggest consequences of this neoliberal trend is that urban development has become a common activity of a diverse group of stakeholders between public agencies, semi-independent public organizations, private companies, public-private partnerships, name it, who have been sharing the responsibilities and risks of pursuing decentralized goals through individualism and entrepreneurialism. The diversification of city building actors created fragmented efforts to build cities between public, private, and community actors. More importantly, at least for the urban planning field, we also feel the shift from well-coordinated spatial planning activities towards spatial governance, whereby entrepreneurial dynamics motivated the local governments to establish some connections between fragmented city building efforts rather than master planning or spatially designing the entire cities. These new state-market citizen relations changed the role of planning and its place as a mediator between diverse actors, trying to balance needs, negotiate, and establish consensus in the city. The picture actually also has changed, as we know that there is a huge diversity within each actor categories. So the picture and the role of planning has become a little bit like this. This wider picture has created blurred boundaries of responsibilities, roles, and actions, and new forms of collaboration, co-production, and negotiation emerged between public and private sector actors and community groups, while the private and public sector actors have grown closer to each other. More importantly, those who could self-organize themselves actively became entrepreneurial actors with stronger impacts in city building. Here we are not only talking about the property market actors, but also urban communities, citizens groups, or individuals who can network, negotiate, or be involved in city building endeavors. All these efforts are part of the new entrepreneurial governance framework in which the local government and, of course, public planning agency become one of the key players in urban development, casts as an active negotiating party instead of the party developing and implementing urban development policy through fragmented channels of governance. So we don't have anymore a very prominent role or place of the public planning agency in this picture. Fragmentation is an essential characteristic of urban governance. Under the neoliberal political economic ideology, scholarly literature highlights several characteristics of contemporary urban governance, especially within this entrepreneurial picture. So entrepreneurial, market-oriented, privatized, and contractualized urban governance are referred as the underlying reason for this institutional fragmentation. So I've been talking about fragmentation a lot so far. In a previous research on contractual governance, I looked into fragmented regimes of public accountability in this form of urban governance. So who is responsible for what? How can we, or how can the public sector keep the other actors accountable? We called this process fragmentation as the institutional complexity caused by the increasingly diverse types of actors or organizations involved in contemporary development. These regulatory activities accommodate equally complex regimes of accountability, and they are quite difficult to follow. So as a result, of course, it becomes very unclear who is responsible for what and how the city is developing in a wider sense. Within this fragmented institutional environment, we can define the entrepreneurial city as a city that tries to increase its attractiveness with explicit spatial and economic strategies through coalitions of public and private sector actors. These coalitions create a scattered morphology of urban space, and these spatial developments are operationalized through uncoordinated and complex institutional relations between public and private sector actors, and of course the citizens as well. Across the globe, we also witness the diminished possibilities for local governments to interlink these spatial interventions with the developments in the wider built environment. So it becomes the new normal of city building in a way. Drawing the picture of responsibilities and roles in these fragmented city building landscapes is quite difficult though. In my work, I tend to create actor maps of diverse city building activities to see the wider institutional framework, like the one you see here in the screen. This is from Toronto on a specific topic of governing urban diversity matters. So all the organizations, regulations, and actors related to diversity matters are on this very broad map. But it is a very complex and challenging task, as not only the roles are blurred in this landscape today, but also the actors, their positions and efforts constantly change through time. So we cannot actually draw such a static picture as you see on the screen, because the picture constantly changes and shifts in time. And it is important to understand this, of course. With this, I would like to move a little bit towards the direction of the actors. I've been talking about actors so far. And here what I mean by actors as mainly the market, state and community organizations or individuals who take part in decision-making mechanisms of the city. So we are, of course, part of it as individuals or also academics in this collective endeavor. And then we have the actor landscapes, because actors are not acting alone, they are connected to each other. And actor landscapes mean shortly the collection of actors and their dynamic behaviors within a specific institutional context. They contain the assemblages of actors, their characteristics, operational, financial, organizational, and so on, and their locational and strategic behavior in cities. These characteristics and behavior are embedded in wider economic and regulatory processes. So actors don't just float around the city doing whatever they want. They do things within the framework of regulation, but also the norms, principles, and tactics and strategies, formal and informal deals that link them individually together. A good metaphor to study the dynamic actor landscapes in that sense is the hybrid landscapes of governance, where complex networks of actors and their relations regulated by institutions co-produce the built environment in pieces and bits scattered throughout the city. I'm going to illustrate it in a minute to make you hear this picture from my point of view. But if we would put a city under a giant microscope, what would we see? We could see, in my view, layers of actors, regulations, and administrative and organizational bodies at diverse levels, like neighborhood, the city, the state level. In each level, we have different projects, different developments taking place between those actors, organized through regulations and within certain administrative structures. And of course, it's difficult to visualize this, but we can think of the actor landscapes in that sense as a very good metaphor to understand this. So these complex networks of actors and their relations are regulated by institutions to co-produce the built environment in the pieces and bits, as you can see in this illustrative project. So each of these projects mushroom in the city, and they are realized through regulatory and contractual relations between diverse actors at diverse levels of governance. These projects scattered throughout the city, forming hybrid landscapes of governance. In this respect, of course, it is important to understand each project through its context of relations. And here you can see in my screen a kind of city, illustrative city with all these projects popping up with all these complex relations. If we zoom into an illustrative project, we can observe complex institutional relations between public and private sector actors and communities. I call these institutional assemblages pockets of micro-regulation practices. And as you see here, at different scales, at different levels, all these different relations emerge in each single project. And then, of course, looking to Amsterdam, for example, on this picture, you see all these colorful little dots. They represent residential development projects all over the city. So we can see that in each colorful dot illustrated in this map, there is a complex set of institutional relations between diversity of actors forming these pockets of micro-regulation practices throughout the city, establishing a wider complex network of regulation, rules, formal and informal deals, etc. So the city looks like a huge network, but this network is not possible to see it once. It's a very dynamic landscape. What is behind these activities is a complex set of regulations at multiple scales of regulation, realized at different periods of time. To illustrate this, I would like to show you our collection of regulations on residential development in Amsterdam's metropolitan region. We basically analyze all the regulations that is related to residential development in Amsterdam, and through time, of course. And these regulations are issued by national, provincial, municipal, and metropolitan regional authorities from 2000 onwards. This is only the picture from 2000 onwards. And as you can see, there is quite a bit of regulation in the city to control housing development issued through time. It's just the period of last 20-21 years, but you can see that regulations at different political periods change and accumulate through different trajectories. By focusing on the residential regulation in Amsterdam, we operationalized in my recent research the actor landscapes in relation to the regulations around housing production. This exercise enabled us to see the factors that lead the fragmentation of the underlying institutional infrastructure. We group these factors under three main groups. First of all, we observe the regulations targeting divergent state-market relations. Here, the involvement of new private sector actors and increasing market dependency create the need for more governance arrangements to regulate them. Hence, in certain periods, you see more regulations popping up in this map. Secondly, there is an ever complexifying organizational and institutional transformation. Of course, the municipality is trying to reflect on the changing demands and needs and, of course, market conditions. And you can see what happened with COVID and after COVID as well. There are new regulations coming to the scene. And finally, we noticed also the various regulations and institutional narratives shape actor interactions and policy processes, creating fuzzy policy narratives. And here, what I mean by that is that one regulation talks about a phenomena and the other regulation picks it from a different point of view or completely takes it to a different direction. There is no coordination in the bunch of the regulations that we looked in a city like Amsterdam, which is a very well-organized city, if you think about it. Even in this very well-organized city, a very consistent narrative of policy around spatial development did not exist. However, it's not enough to understand how spatial governance regulations envision the city building just by looking at the regulation. We also need to understand the behavior of actors in this dynamic environment, which is not easy because the actors are diverse and they don't always follow the same logical path of behavior. In a recent research called WIC, What is Governed in Cities, we developed a multidimensional approach to understand just one type of actor, which is the property investor, by establishing a meta-categorization of investors in order to conduct a multidimensional reading of property markets, because we thought that our understanding of the property investors is very monodimensional. We just look at certain behavior and we don't see it within the wider framework. So we were trying to put everything together to have this meta-categorization to see the multidimensional aspects of property investors. By looking at property transactions in Amsterdam and other data, we could run some complex analysis to see how property investors behave in Amsterdam by looking at the scale of their operation, the type of their capital, their ownership composition, and their locational and strategic behavior. Through complex analysis that I'm not going to bore you with, we could map the dominant type of investors in the city. This is a new approach just to understand the property investment side of the city building, but there are other actors in the city being part of this effort who contribute to this complex landscape. So there are citizen groups, communities, individuals, public sector agencies, all take initiatives and build projects throughout the city. So, of course, trying to understand the landscape, you need to understand the relational factors between these actors at the same time. At the public policy side, the city of Amsterdam went through a learning process to deal with this complexity. My colleague Sarah Özol's work on triple loop learning of planners and public project managers shows that the municipality is not only very much aware of this complexity, but also is trying to cope with it. They first went through a process to establish, to create alternative tactics to address concrete and context-specific challenges. They established multi-divisional project teams, for example, within the city, with a technical person, a planner, land prices and leasing specialists in each project who learned by doing and trial and error. So, of course, they went through all these by each project. They then adjusted in the second loop their strategies towards individual behavior. At this stage, they invested on junior project managers within the city and trained them for new skills. And finally, they are transforming the existing institutional structure to deal with these entrepreneurial landscapes where projects, ideas, and city building efforts may pop in at any time. They made some changes for more efficient operationalizing contracts and took the policymakers on field trips to the project areas to involve them into this complex process. Because, of course, as you can imagine, and I'm sure it's the same in Italy, the policymakers and planners are not the same body. They are also disconnected from each other. So to make the policymakers understand this complexity was, for the city of Amsterdam, a very important challenge as well. The new Dutch Spatial Development Law, which is going to come into effect somewhere this year or hopefully next year, known as the Omgevingswet, is a good example of transformation from a coordinated spatial planning, which is the Dutch tradition, towards spatial governance, as it enables new forms of experimentation and learning. Not only in Amsterdam, but everywhere, new planning tools begin to emerge to deal with these new spatial practices through soft or community-driven instruments like self-building, urban living labs, commoning, crowdfunding activities, you hear them all over the place, or hard instruments which are more plan-driven, like public land value capturing mechanisms, social land ownership mechanisms, social land ownership tools, rent control mechanisms, inclusionary zoning, or other rights developments, and social contracts. We see them everywhere in the city. Heather Campbell and colleagues invited us in a very interesting study to step aside from standard analysis to investigate the overlooked choices in cities. To do so, I argue in this talk, we need to understand the agency of city building better. The level of fragmentation is very much related to the system's capacity and ability to deal with the complexities of multi-actor governance. Without strong and consistent public sector leadership, this fragmentation is likely to increase in cities. This brings me to my conclusions for urban planning and spatial governance. When I did my PhD, Susan Feinstein's The City Builders book just came out in the bookshelves. It was an incredible discovery for me to understand the city by looking at the property actors' behavior. It was a new approach. Now, under today's entrepreneurial conditions, in which every actor acts as a speculative developer, we need new approaches, not only to see the agencies, but all the others, like property market actors, ourselves, citizens, community groups, public agencies, and others. Understanding this dynamic landscape is very difficult, but it starts with the awareness of this fragmented governance infrastructure behind the entrepreneurial cities. New analytical tools and approaches are needed to understand this complex architecture. And combining these infrastructures, these institutional infrastructures, with wider economic and policy dynamics, with actor behaviors, in order to step aside from standard analysis to investigate overlooked choices, as Campbell et al. Invites us to do. Understanding who and what actually shapes the city requires attention to these multiple dimensions of investor characteristics or actor characteristics and their interplay. I argue that this knowledge will empower local policymakers to develop more targeted regulations to shape, stimulate, regulate, and build capacity in the property markets today. With this, I would like to end my talk by thanking you. If you want to learn more about my ongoing research project WIC or the YouGovern network or the new webinars we are organizing around it, please look into these links. I'm going to share my presentation and you can find the information in there. Thank you.
Thank you. Many thanks for this interesting and stimulating talk. As you accord with Mattia, all the questions will be done at the end of the student's presentation. So now we proceed with the presentation of the student for the group of environment, opportunity, and health. The student, Maddalena Capoferri, will introduce the topic, so I will leave to her the presentation, and then she will be followed by Lorenzo Antonelli, Lucrezia Tondo, Eleonora Pariset, and Chiara Cataldi. I want to say before Maddalena starts that it is important to underline that all the students who belong to this topic and who will be presented during the student presentation participated actively to the preparation of this presentation that has been significantly shortened with respect to their original work. So keep in mind that they did an important synthesis work to arrive to this presentation. Please, Maddalena. Key switch.
Dovrebbero mandarlo da casa.
Come?
Poi dovrebbero mandarlo da casa, il PowerPoint.
Ah, ok.
Aspettiamo i ragazzi coinvolti che comincino con la presentazione.
Ok.
Grazie.
Dovrebbe essere Marian Polito. The student Marian Polito.
Ok.
Here.
Our research focuses on the city as an ecosystem, taking into consideration three related aspects: environment, health, and opportunity. Next, please. We conceived the environment as the space in which individuals act. Health was understood as the mental and physical condition on the individuals themselves. And opportunity was interpreted as the possibility of further development, improving the two basic conditions, health and the environment. The level of interaction between citizens' health and their environment is quite clear. However, the position that opportunity occupies in this relation is less explicit. The answer is a model of active citizenship, which can become a keystone in this triangular relationship, since it makes the citizen an active subject of the ecosystem. In fact, a citizen operating through a bottom-up approach can make a positive impact both on the environment and on his own health. However, if we are to achieve this level of active citizenship, it is necessary for each individual to recognize the importance of cultural heritage, which plays a fundamental role in a community's identity, since communities recognize themselves in it. In this perspective, our school, SSAS, is formative because it considers cultural heritage to be an instrument to construct the world and interact with it, rather than a premise or a goal. Each working group highlighted the disturbances in this ecosystem, that is, over-tourism, water pollution, inefficiency in technological infrastructure, and the crisis of urban growth, in order to find a space for individual citizens to act according to different approaches. Our approach was based on problem solving. Every research comprised a pars destruens, closely analyzing the problems we mentioned, and a pars construens, proposing some strategies aimed at the improvement of citizens' environment and quality of life. Our work is characterized by different features. It is based on a multidisciplinary approach, which reveals interesting analogies with biology, city as an ecosystem, and our proposal of the model of urban growth as cancer city, as well as being comprised of different research approaches, namely sociology and economy in the study of tourism, biology and chemistry for the analysis of water condition, technology for the new horizons of the smart city, medicine and mathematics for our model of cancer city. Our approach calls us to action as citizens who want to become an active part of the society we are immersed in. Okay, next one. Next one. Over-tourism, how can we contrast it? A tourist site is affected by over-tourism when hosts or guests, local or visitors, feel that there are too many visitors and that the quality of life in the area or the quality of the experience has deteriorated unacceptably. This is a definition of the World Tourism Organization. Our aim is to analyze Italian art city situation through the lens of over-tourism, trying to propose a new tourism development model. Next one, please. First of all, we consider the case of Rome. The depopulation problem of the Primo Municipio is one of the consequences of over-tourism, causing the migration of the inhabitants from the city center to the suburbs. This phenomenon has many social and economical consequences, such as urbanicism, which is the death of the historical city center, which in the end becomes an open-air museum belonging to tourists. Next one. In our second case study, Florence, we intend to analyze the economic and social issues that derives from the touristic overspecialization of the city center as it manifests through the phenomena of urbanification and foodification, as well as this model's crisis due to the recent coronavirus pandemic. Next one. In a similar way, we study the city of Venice, which both benefits from the best advantages of tourism and suffers from its worst disadvantages. In particular, we observe the uneven distribution of the tourism traffic routes in Venice and analyze the concept of tourism carrying capacity and critical threshold, as well as the consequences of exceeding them, also considering some elements of economic theory. Next one. We then focus on the FAR Convention as an alternative model for cultural heritage management. We analyze its main principles and consider their implementation in a selection of Italian projects relating to the bottom-up management of cultural heritage. In particular, we analyze the FAR Convention's founding principles regarding cultural heritage, such as the role of public authorities and voluntary initiatives, its importance as a resource for pacific coexistence and democratic participation, and as a valuable element in all levels of education and also in academic research. Our study also considers the problem of networking between heritage communities and ends on the open question of the implementation of interdisciplinary approaches to cultural heritage research. Okay, next one.
Thanks, Maddalena, for the previous presentation. And we are the second group, Rome and its Rivers. And as a group made of students coming from the most diverse field of science, we wanted to tackle some of the deepest and most ancient elements of the city of Rome, which are its rivers. And as you probably all know, the history of Rome starts on the very banks of the river, but what we wanted to focus on is the current and present-day status of the Roman rivers. And to do so, we acted both as scientists and as citizens at the same time. And of course, our interest comes in a period in which nothing makes sense out of the light of ecological awareness. And as acting as scientist, I would like to have the next slide, please. Acting as scientists, our first need was to find out a parameter, an index able to quantify and to relate the quantity of determined pollutants, as the ones showed in the slide behind me, and relate the quantity of pollutants to specific type of contamination. And the parameter that best fitted our need was the Lime Echo Index. And here comes the first important take-home message of the presentation. We easily applied the Lime Echo Index to already published data because published data about the health status of river are easily available to every kind of citizen. And applying the Lime Echo Index to already published data about the health status of Roman rivers, what bewildered us was the fact that the worst values comes from the data retrieved along the course of the river Aniene, which is the main affluent of Tiber, and from Tiber after its confluence with its main affluent. And switch the slide, please. And to confirm what analyzed with the Lime Echo Index analysis, we went through the bioindicators, and bioindicators are biological indicators really susceptible to variation of pollutants in the ecosystem. And for an aquatic ecosystem, and fluvial in particular, the best are the microinvertebrates. And again, the worst results were retrieved from Aniene River and from the Tiber after its confluence with its main affluent. And that is the second main take-home message that we want to deliver. Much of the pollution of the Tiber in Rome comes actually from its main affluent, Aniene. at that point was clear for us, next please, that the criticality had to be seen in the Aniene. And it's at that point that we wanted to act not only as researcher, or at least future researcher, I would say, but also as citizens, because we wanted to act practically to heal the problem, or to get acquainted on what is done to heal the problem of aquatic pollution. And we joined an already established research program held by the CNR, the Centro Nazionale delle Ricerche in Italian, and the project is Flumen, and it's held by a group of CNR researchers, and the aim of Flumen is to involve citizens actively in scientific fields activities such as water sampling, and also in ecological solution installations. And apart from the amusement that we took, as also you can see in the slide, participating in this type of installation activities, we would like to go through the second point of the presentation, and so I invite Lucrezia to switch on her microphone. And the second point is, so what can we do actively?
Lucrezia, devi accendere il microfono.
Lucrezia, your microphone.
Start again.
Okay. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I'm sorry. Okay, so after we focus on how are our river going, looking upon chemical pollution and biological indicators. We try to answer the question, what can we do? As scientists, we stumbled upon a useful tool to make a schedule of properties, topic webs. Topic webs are oriented graphs that describe an ecosystem and the interaction between its elements. So this tool, it is possible to remove one after another, a node from the graph, in order to see how the connection between species change and which species are the backbones of the ecosystem equilibrium. Once we found them, we can quickly search for the pollutants, which are more dangerous for this particular life form, to quickly get rid of them if present in the river. Acting as scientists, we try to search for other strategy in order to answer to the question, what can we do? One of these could be the phytoremediation. Phytoremediation is a bioremediation process that uses various types of plants to remove, transfer, stabilize, and or destroy contaminants in soil and groundwater. This method is based on the natural process by which plants and the microbiota associated with the roots degrade and sequestered contaminants. Next, the river issues need to be deepened even from a legal framework perspective. If we want to act as citizens, we need to know that in Italy, superficial water is considered a public asset and it is persevered following solidarity principles. In order to transpose the EU law, the national territory was divided into 7 river districts in 2015. Tiber and Aniene are part of the bacino idrografico del fiume Tevere, included in the distretto idrografico dell'Appennino centrale. The Autorità di Bacino Distrettuale dell'Appennino centrale represent the competent authority for the soil protection, the hydrological restoration, and for the control over the quality and the quantity of water of Tiber and Aniene. The authority designed the river district plan as well. Don't forget that, like citizens, we can act in different ways. We can make our part in public initiatives, following and cooperating with scientists and raising awareness in citizens. We have to remember, particularly in this period of climate emergencies, that we are the protagonists of the change, that we are the citizens of our cities, and some of us, even the scientists. So in front of the question, what can we do? We have to be ready to answer and act in different ways. Thank you for your attention.
And now, Eleonora Parisetta.
Yeah, do you hear me?
Present the next topic.
Can you hear me?
Sì.
Okay, perfect. So next slide, please. Let's start with a number, 101. But what does the number represent? This is Rome's ranking position in the 2020 Smart City Index, 101st out of 109 cities. The 2020 Smart City Index provides a ranking of global smart cities based on resident feedback, definitely outlines how far behind Rome is compared to other smart cities. So our work tried to answer the question, how could Rome become a smart city? Next slide, please. Analyzing the Smart City Index, we saw that as far as Rome is concerned, the public services that received the lowest valuation have rightly been waste management, air pollution, and public transport. All these sectors are related to the core of the smart city, which is represented by circular economy, sustainability, and ICT. So let's start with waste management. Next slide, please. As you know, waste management is a key part of sustainability, and municipal waste represents a noteworthy and particularly complex portion of global waste. In Italy, municipal waste management is left to municipalities, since coordinating authorities, ATO, are rarely functional. Rome struggles especially with the task, lagging behind the Italian average and national goals, despite its high waste tax. So reasons include bad management of the dedicated company, tax evasion, inefficient collection schemes, and most of all, a lack of adequate city-owned treatment plants in Rome's proximity. So inspired by the smart city paradigm, we suggested a mix of top-down and bottom-up administrative approaches towards solution. And bottom-up approaches include awareness campaigns and door-to-door collection schemes, both managed at a municipal level. Then an innovative possible solution, can you hear? You still hear me? Okay. Then I couldn't see someone, so then I was saying, yeah, an innovative possible solution to waste management in Rome could be the smart waste management. Next slide, please. The smart waste management exploits the Internet of Things that consists on the use of sensors that provide data in real time. Thanks to the application of smart bins in other urban contexts, such as Philadelphia, it was possible to optimize the rubbish collection. Furthermore, smart bins help to raise awareness of recycling. In fact, with avant-garde technologies, it's possible to create a reward system. And two examples of these bins are the Outpost Wi-Fi smart bins in New York and the Enea bins. But smart bins are just an example of applications of the Internet of Things. They can also help to solve other fundamental health and environmental challenges, such as air pollution. As we all know, several components of smog can be harmful to human health. Next slide, please. Fine particles cause damage to the lungs as well as to the cardiovascular system. So to prevent these serious health effects, the European Union has introduced a daily limit of 50 micrograms per cubic meter of particulate matter. In the city of Rome, in December 2015, values below the legal limit were recorded only in 3 days. So a study was then conducted to investigate the effects of this situation on human health. And the results demonstrate that concrete monitoring solutions are needed to avoid serious health effects on the population. And that's the key point. The smart city needs to monitor its environmental conditions and identify the sources of pollution to mitigate them. Data, next slide, please, is the key to understanding the impact of pollution sources, but traditional monitoring technologies are not scalable due to site and energy consumption. So in our work, we analyzed how air quality is now monitored in Rome, which are the indicators and the methods used to do this, and then we came up with monitoring proposals inspired by other smart cities. By deploying a network of sensor nodes, we could monitor air quality and meteorological parameters across the city, generating vast amounts of real-time open data, complex in scale, form, and meaning. And the challenge is to combine, analyze, draw useful insights from big data to support big decisions about short and long-term pollution reduction. Monitoring is obviously great. The figures show that air pollution in Rome is mainly caused by mobility, so we focus on it. Next slide, please. The present situation of Rome in the mobility field isn't very impressive. Public transports aren't efficient, and the transport networks doesn't cover the whole city territory. So to improve this complex situation, the municipal administration redacted the Rome Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan, which lists some goals to reach by 2030 to reduce pollution. Next slide. Sustainable urban mobility requires a mind shift. The model of sustainable mobility is based on a cradle-to-cradle approach to the urban ecosystem. And the sustainable transportation system is affordable, smart, accessible, and renewable resources in new technologies and strategies are used to minimize the environmental impact on transport means. Some of the most useful innovations include hybrid vehicles, hydrogen cells, and biofuels. And then car sharing, bike sharing, carpooling enterprises are promoted. So let's draw inspiration from other smart cities, such as Copenhagen, the city of Linz, or Zaragoza. But finally, let's get to the last part of our work, which argues that, next slide, hospitals can be considered as a small-scale model of smart cities. We provided an overview of both so next slide, please. Okay. We provided an overview of both the Italian and Roman situation. Analyzing the Roman situation, we saw that on one end, hospitals like Fondazione Policlinico Gemelli make their own environmental sustainability a pride to promote and share. And on the other hand, on the website of our Policlinico Umberto I, it is possible to find only information regarding the legislature about environmental waste. So we think that it is time for Policlinic Umberto I, as well as for Rome, to focus as much as possible on environmental sustainability, starting, as Francis of Assisi said, by doing what's necessary, then doing what's possible. And suddenly, we will be doing the impossible. So to sum up, after taking into consideration these crucial aspects of the matter, it appears that in order for Rome to be a smart city, it needs to follow 3 principles: applying best practice models. Next slide, please. Okay, applying best practice models, raising awareness of sustainability, and involve the local communities in the decision-making process. And last but not least, introducing ICT in all sectors, because innovation represents the key element to make a city both competitive and integrated into the global smart city system. So we argue that by doing so, the city can achieve concrete improvement in the quality of life of its residents and take an important step toward becoming a smart city. Thank you.
Chiara Cataldi will present this topic.
Yes. Okay. So this is the last part of our group project focused on the pathology. Starting with the definition, cancer is a disease in which abnormal cells divide without control and can invade nearby and faraway tissues. The result is a new tissue in a healthy one and the progressive subversion of the previous homeostasis. But why can we talk about cancer cities? The aim of our work is to compare some peculiarities of cancer with corresponding features in cities, using different mathematical scaling ideas to strengthen this similarity. Next, we focus on 3 hallmarks of cancer, unique features of the differentiated cancer cells, including the unlimited self-renewal, the capability of evading cellular death, and immune system suppression, and many more. The first comparison relates the cancer-deregulated metabolism with the energy consumptions in cities. In both cases, a superlinear allometric scaling law of energy uptake with sides is observed. The second parallel deals with the cancer androgenic process and the development of infrastructures in cities, comparing the fractal dimension of tumoral vascular systems and that of road networks. The third analogy is made between metastatic spreading of cancer in the organism and urban growth. We show that the frequency distribution of the volume of metastasis in a cohort of patients follow low. So, as a future research, we have in mind to deepen this parallelism by verifying further correspondences, such as Hip's law for metastasis.
We do not hear, Chiara.
System. Next, on the other side, in next.
Chiara?
On the other side, in our, see?
We cannot
Can you hear me?
very well. We didn't hear what you said before.
Okay, now can you hear me?
Now, yes.
Okay. Yes, yes, now this is the slide, thank you. Yes, I was telling that on the other side, in our bottom-up approach, the second part of our work focuses on a possible barrier to the development of a cancer city in terms of balance and symbiosis. Indeed, talking about medical care, if we can't achieve the radical treatment, we move to other therapeutical treatments aimed at controlling the growth of the tumor by establishing a balance between tumor cells and the surrounding tissue. Next, in the same way, we report the proposal by the architect Luc Schuiten of a new model of real city, so-called Cité Végétale, which, rediscovering a symbiosis with nature, could stop the development of a cancer city. So the resulting decrease of the environmental pollution corresponds in the end to a reduction of an identified and well-known risk factor for cancer. So this is our solution. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thanks. You kept the time. Now the discussion is open, so if somebody from the audience or from the virtual audience or in presence audience want to pose some questions to Professor Tuna, Tasan-Kok, or to the students, or reciprocally from Professor Tuna to students or vice versa, you can do that.
Shall I start?
Yes.
Okay, I really enjoyed these presentations, fantastic metaphors, and of course, looking from my perspective, looking to fragmentation idea, whatever has been presented, in my view, fits very much into understanding this form of fragmentation taking place in cities. Take the last one, for example, the cancer city. Take the smart city initiatives. Take the active citizenship discussions. They all bring us to the same interesting idea that city building is now endeavor of several different agencies. So in that, I would like to ask, not to a specific group, but perhaps one of the groups can take the lead. What are the new forms of inequalities created by this approach? Think of the discussion on active citizenship, for example. Think of the over-tourism discussions. Think of smart cities discussions. What kind of new inequalities do you guys see taking place in the city because of this? An open discussion, perhaps.
Thank you, Tuna. Who of the students want to answer? Want start to answer? Maybe Chiara, Lorenzo. What do you think? About the different topic you treat? Maddalena, for the over-tourism, do you think there is something? Oh, Maddalena is here, maybe? She's waiting for the microphone. Just a minute.
There's not really a correct answer, really. I mean, it's a discussion, so everybody is welcome.
Here, Maddalena, you cannot see maybe, but she's talking now. Vuoi venire, Maddalena, se il microfono... We have this blended organization, so it's not so easy.
I think that inequality in over-tourism can be seen between the condition of maybe the perception, the different perception that tourists and citizens have of the city. For example, sometimes it happens that citizens cannot leave the city, and this is due, obviously, at the phenomenon of over-tourism. And so I think that maybe in Venice and also in Rome, these overcrowded streets, the fact that we don't have a real perception of the city, I think that this is one of the form of inequality in cities, for my part of the research.
We have a very similar problem in Amsterdam, you know, the over-tourism and overcrowded streets, especially in the summer periods, which is not there anymore. I was biking in Amsterdam last week from my house to 20 minutes to the Dam Square, which is impossible in this period. Normally, you can't bike because it's full of tourists. You can't sit in a restaurant because you don't enjoy it. And of course, people living in the center of cities, they have big problems with dirt and nuisance in the streets beyond imagination. I mean, the story is coming from the city of Amsterdam. Citizen councils is mind-blowing. However, of course, that's also part of the urban economy. So when we take a step to deal with a problem in the city, we are creating other problems. It's a little bit like your cancer city metaphor. You try to deal with one cell, but then there are all these other cells around it, and then you create impacts that you don't want to create. So I fully agree with you, and that's the inequality in the city. But of course, I think as planners, we will have to come up with new approaches to deal with it, because we can't prohibit tourism, right? The city of Amsterdam is trying to limit certain things. For example, they cancel the shops, certain kinds of tourism elements in the city. But we know the profile of people coming to Amsterdam, big fun makers, and they are the ones that are creating the nuisance. However, dealing with this problem also leads to certain forms of anti-democratic interventions. So here, I think inequalities are open question, but more, I think when it comes to tourism, it's more like a challenge for the planner to be smarter in a sense of being creative to deal with this problem.
Yes, I also think that another problem in this situation we show with the over-tourism is that there's a sort of state for the economy. Everything is based on these touristic flows. And so we spoke very much about the pandemic situation and the fact that after this pandemic situation, citizens can live better the city. But on the other hand, there is a great crisis, economical crisis, because there are no tourists. And so I think that this is another problem related with all the problem of the tourism.
Yes. Yes, remember 1980s, maybe even before, cities were crying out for new economic resources, and tourism became one of those resources. For many cities, it still is the main economic resource. And if we take it completely out, of course, we create other problems in the city. So it's a difficult balance situation. But well done. I mean, that's definitely one form of concerns that we need to think about in the city.
Thank you, Maddalena.
May I also answer the question?
Yes.
I didn't answer quickly because I started to think to an adequate answer to the question posed by Tuna. And I thought that active citizenship is actually a way to contrast inequality. In our case, we analyzed Rome and its rivers. So the pollutants present in the rivers and the effects of pollutants on human health. And in Rome, for example, who lives near Aniene is more subject to the pollutant agents which are present inside the river Aniene. So active citizenship against this kind of pollution is a way to fight against inequality within the city. So we think that this may be a first step to fight against this problem.
Gabriele, I completely agree with you, but there is a however that will come next to my sentence. Not that I disagree with you, I completely agree with you about that. It's a first step, and citizen empowerment and active citizenship are part of democratization and repoliticization of the city, for sure. However, it comes with also the pacifization of certain other actors. First of all, it makes, active citizenship only makes the local governments a bit reliant on other agents like the active citizens, whatever. So they take a step backwards and expect a lot of things from the citizens. For certain things, it's a good thing. For example, following the pollution, it's absolutely a very important thing. There is this control mechanism throughout the city going on. However, think of other fields where active citizenship may create inequalities. For example, if you are not an active citizen, if you are a passive citizen, if you can't organize yourself, if you can't take part in the city networks of policy decisions, your voice cannot be heard. And if there is no representation that will make your voice to be heard, then your wishes, your needs will not be heard in the background. And this, there is a huge discussion about active citizenship from this point of view. So there are like pros and cons, and you are definitely showing us the pros of active citizenship. But when it comes to, for example, I don't know, think of a need for social services in a neighborhood who is able to organize themselves with active citizens would be able to require, for example, a new park from the empty plot of land which is in the middle of the neighborhood by simply organizing themselves and making their voices heard by the local governments. But a neighborhood who is not able to do it is not going to be heard, is not going to receive that service that the others are receiving. So I think my only concern there is that active citizenship cannot be alone. It has to be with supervised, overlooked, or over-controlled public sector intervention. I believe in public sector intervention in that respect.
Yeah, I think that a political action might be very important in this case. And maybe a compromise in this regard would be an active citizen act.
Gabriele, can you hear?
May very well work together and not also be separated. I completely agree. I didn't think about the laziness of the politician with the act of.
Your microphone is not perfect. I didn't understand if you finish your comment.
Absolutely. I agree. Yeah.
Okay.
Great point.
Other questions? Here or outside? If we have
I have just a brief digression for the topic brought up by Professor Tasan-Kok. From the health point of view, certainly the people who live and work in highly industrialized and developing cities, maybe with few prevention measures and reduced access to healthcare, they are definitely more likely to encounter complications caused by pollution. I think about countries like India, like China, like Russia and Brazil. So they definitely have to be taken into consideration when we talk about air pollution control and monitoring, because we live in industrialized countries, but we are developed countries. So we have these preventing measures. They don't have them. So that's kind of a difference between us.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you, Alberto. And in those countries, you can also see that more top-down measures are still in charge. And of course, democratization demands coming from the society, from the citizens groups, also increasing, which is great. But at the same time, as you can see, I always show the Netherlands as an example because it's a heaven for planning, right? It's a very well-organized planning system. And even in this very well-organized and coordinated planning system, it is impossible to see the, let's say, the forest before the trees. We have a very fragmented form of responsibilization of everything. And at the end of the day, when you look at years pass without a real vision, because of course the cities develop visions, Amsterdam city develop visions, but they don't stay very long active. Now after COVID, they will have a new vision. After something else, so they are all prone to crisis and changes, and they are reflecting to this form of very dynamic change in the environment. Compare it with the, I don't know, before Second World War, golden years of planning, let's say, where a planner imagined a city and that city was built. Like imagine Chicago, imagine Paris, imagine other places where spatial planning was really top-down implemented, disregarding the needs of anybody living in the city. So now we move to this very different, very democratized forms, but now we are kind of losing the control over these demands coming from all over the place. So we need a little bit more control, in my view, in that.
Yes, absolutely. And talking about taking responsibilities, we have to take into consideration the fact that governments, some governments refuse to take responsibility for climate change, for example, and even big societies refuse to take responsibility for their production and emissions of CO2 in the atmosphere.
Yes, yes. And of course, most of the cases, I mean, in the Dutch case, the citizens are very actively involved, but in some cases, you see a game between the governments, local government or central government, and the market actors, and the citizens' voices are completely silenced in that speculative game. And I don't want to name names, but certain countries, you can see that kind of very authoritarian forms of urban development also taking place under today's conditions.
Yes, definitely. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
If I can add, as far as smart cities are concerned, I think that a lot of smart city initiatives are very top-down, devised, driven by corporate, some sort of technocentric agendas maybe, that don't generally even consider inequality, let alone how to reduce it. So smart cities may actually increase social inequality, especially given the existing digital divide. What about those who simply don't have access to digital services? I mean, cities need to invest heavily in increasing access to technology. And smart cities otherwise could result in destructive forms of intercity competition. too.
Thanks, Eleonora. Now, if we do not have any other question, Professor Lenzi, our president, would like to do a comment.
Oh. Mi sentite?
No.
Pronto, pronto. Sì, eccomi. Beh, first of all, thank you, Professor Kok, obviously. The second one is just a comment and a reflection for, above all, for our student. In Italy exists from 2015 an institution named the Health City Institute. I am one of the co-founders, so I know very well this institute. It is a think tank created to be around a table with medical doctors, public administrators, expert in urban health, expert in public health, engineer, architects, psychologists, sociologists, and so on. And you can visit this, the website of this Health City Institute. This could be very useful for you. Among the project, one project is a global project. The name is City Changing Diabetes. I'm an endocrinologist, so I am very interested in this, obviously. And this project is, involves 37 cities around the world. And we have reached very interesting results. For example, one above all in Rome, the prevalence of diabetes in the center of Rome is 5.2. In the neighborhood of Rome is 7.9. So that means that diabetes is not a disease of rich people, but of poor people. Poor in culture, poor in money, poor in sociology, behavior, and so on. So this could be very interesting for you and for this to complete this project of this year of the Advanced Studies School of Sapienza. And so I would like to underline the importance that also the government, and not only the government, the Italian government, are in this kind of topic. 3 days ago, the 2 of July, in the Parliament, and it was a session dedicated to the urban health, and this session was completely open to discussion, and it is in the document will be an urban health declaration, and this project was supported by G20, the meeting of the major 20 countries around the world. So, just to say, as I said during my presentation, during my introduction, that this school could be a very big future, because the topic you chosen for this year is very à la page, on dirait en français. Bon, ça va, nous pouvons terminer maintenant en français. Switch to France, oui. Grazie a tutti quanti, buona giornata, grazie ancora Professor Kok, thank you Professor Kok. And credo che adesso il direttore ci abbia organizzato anche un piccolo rinfresco, giusto?
Mattia, you would like to say something to finish?
No. Some information concerning the catering. Just for us, unfortunately, not for you, the Professor Kok. I'm sorry.
Tuna, you cannot be here, but we have we have a very sunny day, and could be nice for you. But you will come in presence next time.
We hope so.
Absolute pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for this. This is fantastic. Even under these conditions, I totally enjoyed this. And also, I would like to thank all the students. They did great jobs. I'm going to bring this to my students. I really enjoyed your creativity and innovation in your studies, and I wish you all the best with your career further.
Thank you.
You are, I think I can say that you are officially invited in presence when you will be able to come, okay?
Absolutely, thank you so much.
Thank you very much once more, Tuna. It was a pleasure to be here, to have here today, at least virtually, but we really look forward to warmly welcome you in person in the next future. Thanks a lot again.
Bye.
Adesso, prima di tutto, sarebbe molto carino farci una foto qua, davanti, diciamo, al banco di presidenza, al tavolo di presidenza, e poi abbiamo un piccolo rinfresco in terrazza.
In terrazza ce l'abbiamo? Wow.
Si potrebbe anche fare la foto davanti allo schermo.
If you like, Tuna, we can organize suddenly a picture of all of us, and if you stay at your screen, you can enter and be
with us, at least in the picture.
Oh, that will be lovely.
Okay, thanks a
Thank
lot.
you.